All right, let's do it. Hopefully, we had that good discussion. She had just jumped out the window. Probably didn't cut herself because of the cover, but maybe she fell pretty far down. She didn't know how far it was. She didn't want to look. So let's keep reading and find out how far it was. Is Pickering just going to give up? No. Come on. It's got to be like a Marvel movie or something. There's got to be a fight to the death. I mean, Pickering probably has to die, right? Or she dies. But that would be a weird. I mean, it could happen. Could be. But the bad guy wins? I don't know. Let's see what happens here. Gravity is everyone's mother. Let's read on. She'd been a tomboy as a kid, preferring boys' games, the best one simply called guns, in the woods behind their house in suburban Chicago, to goofing around with Ken and Barbie on the front porch. All right, so clearly she grew up. Oh, if you remember that, I don't know if you can play a game like guns anymore, right? Parents don't want you to play with guns. When I was a kid, it didn't really matter. We always played guns in the woods. Just grab a stick, play with a gun. But now it's like, oh no, no guns, no guns. I don't even know if you can say tomboy anymore. Would Stephen King get canceled because of that? But I don't think we mentioned it the day before, but there was a picture that was dated '07. So maybe this takes place in '07, '08. It does make sense. Like there was a Dell PC on the table, something like that. So she might have grown up, I don't know, maybe around, she might be my age. So maybe she was growing up in the '70s, playing guns. She didn't like Ken and Barbie. Who can blame her, right? All right, back to this. She lived in her tough skins. I'm so old. That's like jeans that you are not going to tear apart or whatever. And shell tops. Hair scooped back behind her head in a ponytail. She and her best friend Becca watched old Eastwood Schwarzenegger movies on TV instead of the Olsen twins. And when they watched Scooby Doo, they identified with the dog rather than Velma or Daphne. For 2 years in grammar school, their lunches were Scooby snacks. Sounds familiar. Olsen twins, though, that's like early '90s, I think. They're from Full House. You might know Fuller House on Netflix. And they climbed trees, of course. Emily seemed to remember her and Becca hanging out in the trees in their respective backyards, top of the next column, for a whole summer. They might have been 9 that year. Other than her father's lesson on how to fall, the only thing Em remembered clearly about the tree climbing summer was her mother putting on some kind of white cream on her nose every morning and telling her, "Don't wipe that off, Emmy," in her obey me or die voice. One day, Becca lost her balance and came very close to falling 15 feet to the Jackson lawn. Maybe only 10, but at the time, it looked to the girls like 25, even 50. She saved herself by grabbing a branch, but then hung there, wailing for help. Rusty had been mowing the lawn. He strolled over. Yes, strolled. He even took his time to kill the Briggs and Stratton. So I think that's a type of motor for the lawnmower, right, Tyler? I'm not sure. And held out his arms. "Drop," he said. And Becca, only 2 years past her belief in Santa and still sublimely trusting, dropped. Rusty caught her easily, then called Em down from the tree. He made both girls sit at the base. Becca was crying a little, and Em was scared, mostly that tree climbing would now become an act that was forbidden, like walking down to the corner store alone after 7 p.m. Rusty did not forbid them, although Emily's mother might have, if she had been looking out the kitchen window. What he did was teach them how to fall, and then they practiced for almost an hour. What a cool day that had been. Top of the next column. As she went out through the window, Em saw it was a damn good distance to the flag patio below. Maybe only 10 feet, but it looked like 25 as she dropped with the shredded coverlet fluttering around her, or 50. So if you're wondering, like 10 feet, roughly, if you look at the ceiling in the classroom and down, it's roughly 10 feet, give or take, but right around 10 feet. In the middle here. Let your knees give way, Rusty had told them 16 or 17 years before during tree climbing summer, also known as the summer of the white nose. Don't ask them to take the shock, they will. In 9 cases out of 10. If the drop isn't too far, they will. But you could end up with a broken bone, hip, leg, or ankle. Ankle most likely. Remember that gravity is everyone's mother. Give in to her. Let her hug you. Let your knees give way, then tuck and roll. M hit the red Spanish flag style flagstones and let her knees give way. At the same time, she shoulder checked the air, throwing her weight to the left. She tucked her head and rolled. There was no pain, no immediate pain, but a vast jarring went through her, as if her body had become an empty shaft and someone had dropped some large piece of furniture right down the center. Kind of like an empty elevator shaft, and then you just drop a couch down there. A pretty good metaphor, I think. Pretty good simile, I think. But she kept her head from rapping the flagstones, and she didn't think she had broken either leg, although only standing would prove her right. She struck a metal patio table hard enough to knock it over. Then she got to her feet, still not entirely sure her body was intact enough to do this, top of the next column, until it actually did. She looked up and saw Pickering peering out the broken window. His face was cramped into a grimace, and he was brandishing the knife. "Stop it," he shouted. "Stop running away and hold still." As if, M thought. The last of that afternoon's rain had turned to fog, dotting her upturned face with dew. Felt heavenly. She gave him the finger and shook it for emphasis. So I can imagine her, I won't really do the finger, but maybe like the fake finger or whatever. She's just so mad. She shakes it at him. I like it. He's got the knife. I mean, they're pretty far apart. Neither one of them can get too close to each other. They're having this kind of battle. And thought, where is it here? At the bottom, I think, right? As if M thought. Yeah, we already read that. Wow. Bad word. One of the worst words there. I definitely will not read that. Pickering roar, "Don't you flip me off or flip the bird." Oh, I wish I could block that word out. That's bad. And threw the knife at her. Didn't even come close. It struck the flagstones with a clang and skittered away beneath his gas grill in two pieces, blade and handle. When she looked up again, the shattered window was vacant. Her dad's voice told her Pickering was coming, but M hardly needed that update. She went to the edge of the patio, walking easily, not limping, although she supposed she might owe that to the adrenaline surge, and looked down, 3 measly feet to the sand, and see oats. A bunny compared to the drop she had just survived. Beyond the patio was the beach, where she had done so many morning runs. She looked the other way, towards the road, but that was no good. The ugly concrete wall was too high, and Pickering was coming. Of course he was. Top of the next column. She braced one hand on the ornamental brickwork, then dropped to the sand. Sea oats tickled her thighs. She hurried up to the dune between the pillbox and the beach, hitching at her ruined shorts and looking repeatedly back over her shoulder. Nothing. Still nothing. And then Pickering burst out through the back door, yelling at her to stop right where she was. He had ditched the yellow slicker and had grabbed some other sharp object. He was waving it in his left hand as he ran down the walk to the patio. She couldn't see what it was and didn't want to. She didn't want him to get that close. She could outrun him. Something in his gait said he would be fast for a little while and then flag, no matter how strongly his insanity and his fear of exposure pricked him on. She thought, "It's as if I was training for this all along." Yet she almost made a crucial mistake when she got to the beach. She almost turned south. I would have taken her to the end of Vermilion Key in less than a quarter of a mile. Of course, she could hail the drawbridge gate down when she got there, scream her lungs out for help, actually. But if Pickering had done something to Deke Hollis, she was afraid that was the case, she would then be toast. There might be a passing boat she could scream to, but she had an idea Pickering was far past any restraint. Top of the next column. At this point, he would probably be willing to stab her to death on the stage of Radio City Music Hall as the Rockettes looked on. So she turned north instead, where almost 2 miles of empty beach lay between her and the grass shack. She stripped off her sneakers and began to run. Part 10. What she had not expected was the beauty. This wasn't the first time she had run on the beach after one of these brief but powerful afternoon storms, and the feeling of wetness accumulating on her face and arms was familiar. So was the heightened sound of the surf. The tide was on the come now. The beach narrowing to a strip. That's a weird sentence right there. And the heightened aromas, salt, seaweed, flowers, even wet wood. She had expected to be frightened, the way she supposed people in combat were frightened while doing dangerous jobs that usually, but not always, came out all right. What she had not expected was the beauty. The fog had come in from the Gulf. The water was a dull green phantom, a little metaphor there, heaving shoreward through the white. The fish must have been running because it was a pelican all-you-can-eat buffet out there. She saw most as projected shadows, folding their wings and plummeting at the water. A few others, top of the next column, bobbed up and down on the waves closer in, seeming as dead as decoys, but watching her. Out there to her left, the sun was a small orange-yellow coin, peering dully. Wow, I got to stop there for a second. Right there, back to back. We got a simile, seeming as dead as decoys, and then we got a metaphor. The sun was, no, like her as there, a orange-yellow coin. Peering dully. So we kind of have some personification there, too. Nice job, Stephen King. She was afraid her calf would cramp up again. If that happened, she was done, finished. But this was work it had become used to, and it felt loose enough, if a little too warm. Her lower back was more worrisome, broadcasting a twinge with every third or fourth stride, sending out a heavier flash of pain every 2 dozen or so. More personification there. But she talked to it inside her head, babied it, promised it hot baths and shitashu massages when this was over. And the feral creature behind her was safely incarcerated in the Collier County Jail. It seemed to work. Either that or running itself was kind of a massage. She had reasons to think this was so. Pickering bellowed twice more for her to stop, then fell silent, saving his breath for the chase. She looked back once and thought he was perhaps 70 yards behind, like almost a football field's length. The only thing about him standing out in the misty late afternoon was his red Izod shirt. She looked again, and he was clearer. She could see blood-spattered khaki shorts, 50 yards behind. But panting, good. Panting was good. Emily leaped over a tangle of driftwood, and her shorts slid down, threatening to hobble or even trip her up. She didn't even have time to stop and take them off, so she yanked them up savagely, wishing there was a drawstring she could pull, maybe even clutch in her teeth. Top of the next column. There was a yell from behind her, and she thought there was fear as well as fury in it. It sounded as though Pickering was finally realizing this might not go his way. She risked another look back, hoping, and her hope was not in vain. He had tripped over the driftwood she had skipped over and had gone to his knees. His new weapon lay before him, making an X in the sand. Scissors, then. Kitchen scissors. The big kind cooks used to snap gristle and bone. He snatched them up and scrambled to his feet. Em ran on, increasing her speed a little bit at a time. She didn't plan on doing this, but she didn't think it was her body taking over either. There was something between body and mind, some interface, that was the part of her that wanted to be in charge now. And Em let it take over. That part wanted her to turn it on just bit by bit, almost gently, so the animal behind her wouldn't realize what she was doing. All right, we're right there. And there's another metaphor. She compared Pickering to an animal, but not used like her as. That part wanted to tease Pickering into increasing his own speed to keep up with her, maybe even close the gap a little. That part wanted to use him up and blow him out. That part wanted to hear him gasping and wheezing, maybe even coughing if he was a smoker, although that seemed too much to hope for. Then she would put herself into overdrive gear she now had but rarely used. That gear always seemed like tempting fate. Top of the next column. Somehow, like donning waxed wings on a sunny day. Ah, there you go. There's a little, we should stop here for a second. There's a little hint to, I believe, Greek mythology. Sixth grade used to be when, I think in social studies class, you would study mythology, but I think that has gone away. Does anybody know Icarus? Wax wings? Wax wings? All right, maybe a good place for us to stop right there. I got it highlighted, but we can talk about that, and then maybe if nobody knows, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Icarus, wax wings, the sun metaphor. I mean, not a metaphor, but kind of like a moral to the story. All right, keep that in mind. Icarus, we'll talk. If not, don't worry. We'll talk a little Greek mythology tomorrow. I'm sure you're all super excited about that.